In Israel, there is a place called Qumran, located near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. Since 1947, archaeologists have discovered several ancient manuscripts of the Bible in some caves near Qumran. Later on, these manuscripts were known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. The first cave in which the ancient scrolls were found was called Cave 1. The second cave was called Cave 2, and so on, all the way through Cave 11. These scrolls were placed inside ceramic vessels. Although many of these were in fragments when found, scholars were able to identify all of the Old Testament books, except for the Book of Esther.
Behind me is Cave 4, where more than 14,000 fragments of Scripture were found, including the Book of Nehemiah, confirmed by a Norwegian scholar in 2012. Since much of the Book of Nehemiah was written in first person, many scholars conclude that Nehemiah himself was the author of the book. As for the Book of Ezra, Jews have traditionally believed it was authored by Ezra himself. It was written in first person. The structure of these two books is consistent throughout. Some scholars believe these two books were compiled by scribes from the non-extant books of Ezra's biography and the memoirs of Nehemiah thematically rather than chronologically. This thematic approach is evident in Ezra chapter 4, verses 6 to 23, where the events that took place after the rebuilding of the temple seem to have been inserted. It is still not clear when the two books were written. The three returns of the Israelites to Jerusalem occurred during the reign of the Persian Empire. All of these came about because of one person, Cyrus the Great, the first king of the Persian Empire. It was recorded in Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia, so that he sent a herald throughout all his kingdom, and also in a written edict declared, "Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of those among you who are of his people are now permitted to go up to Jerusalem in Judah and rebuild the house of the Lord."
In the scripture, the first year of Cyrus refers to 538 BC. It was the second year after Cyrus established the Persian Empire. Cyrus founded his capital at Pusargudi. Today, Pusargudi is located in south-central Iran, near the Persian Gulf. In the ruins of the capital, Pusargudi, lie the tomb of Cyrus and two groups of the palaces. Archaeologists called them Palace P and Palace S. In the middle, there is an imperial garden. The King's Gate is at the front. In the ruins of the King's Gate, there is a two-winged statue wearing an Egyptian-style crown. Alongside the head of the statue, "I am Cyrus," and Achaemenid king were inscribed. The two palaces at Pusargadi share a common characteristic. Their pillars are composed of black and white stones. On a square pillar at a corner of Palace P, there is a passage inscribed in three languages: Ancient Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. It says, "The God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth," which is nearly identical to Ezra chapter 1, verse 2. In the late 19th century, at the ruins of Babylon, archaeologist Hormuzd Rassam found the Cyrus cylinder, which recorded the proclamation of Cyrus, that he had returned the holy vessels and statues taken from the temple west of the Euphrates River. Also, he allowed the captives from different provinces to return to their own countries.
These inscriptions are consistent with the scriptures in the book of Ezra. More amazingly, 200 years prior to the establishment of the Persian Empire, the prophet Isaiah had prophesied about Cyrus. Isaiah chapter 45, verses 1 through 5 says God will raise up a man named Cyrus. Although Cyrus did not know God, God anointed him to be a king and subdued the nations under him. Chapter 44, verse 28 specifically says that Cyrus shall carry out the purpose of God to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. The events of the history and prophet books of the Bible are not coincidence, but the continuous revelation of the plan of God.
Persepolis, the biggest city of the Persian Empire, is filled with palaces and statues of kings. There are many stone reliefs depicting the nobles of Media and Persia, the palace attendants, the mighty guards, and the tributes offerings by affiliated states. This is the scene of Audience Hall collected in the National Museum of Iran. Archaeologists believe that the figure sitting on the throne is King Ahasuerus. The figure standing behind the throne is the prince, who later became King Artaxerxes. The 100 Columns Palace is in the Persepolis Palace Complex. A statue of King Artaxerxes sitting on his throne was carved on one of the door frames. The three returns of the Jews took place in the reigns of King Cyrus and King Artaxerxes.
This is the museum inside the Old City of Jerusalem. It is called the Tower of David Museum. It exhibits the history of the exile and return of the Israelites.
The first return was in 537 BC. King Cyrus issued a decree and appointed Zerubbabel to lead more than 40,000 people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. The second return was in 458 BC, 79 years after the first return. During the reign of King Artaxerxes, Ezra, a religious leader, led around 5,000 people to return to Jerusalem and implemented religious reforms. The third return was in 445 BC, 13 years later, when Artaxerxes was still the king. Nehemiah, a political leader, led a group of Jews to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and executed a series of social and religious reforms among the Jewish community.
Therefore, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah can be read according to the three returns and final revival during the Nehemiah period. The first return period began with Cyrus's decree and concluded with the completion of the rebuilding of the temple, return from Babylonian captivity, restoring sacrifices, laying the foundation, rebuilding the temple and the forced stop, restart and completion of the temple.
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.